if it dies. So if they say, if it's saying, we can't hear you anymore, batteries. Okay. Is it going yet? I'm not seeing.
Yes.
It's got a 30-second lag or whatever. Okay, 6, 7. The stream is bad, it says. I think it's probably going to say that all the time.
Put a time on that.
I'm sorry?
If it says good, you're good.
Stream status bad.
That's normal at the beginning.
Okay. Live for 24 seconds, but it's not streaming it yet. It's got a 30-second lag. Is that what we thought? Something like that. Do I hit play for public view? Oh, there I am. Yeah. I'm sorry. But I should not play that. Me pausing it is not pausing the stream, right?
Correct.
Okay. So no one's watching. Looks like. Where will I see that?
Analytics.
And where is that? Oh, there I see, under analytics. One playback, that was me. There's Mr. Schreiber. We have 2 here live.
There are not 3?
Oh, there's 3, yes, but he's got a t-shirt on, so he doesn't count.
I thought there was going to be a bunch of people.
Well, we have about 50 that signed up for the course, for the lecture series.
What happened there?
Only about 12 are from this area.
Oh.
So I'm looking at,
So most are on the phone.
we have a viewer, the health is good. Is the viewer you, Joel?
No.
Okay.
So you're recording this though?
Yeah, we're streaming it and recording it.
So people can watch it on their computer.
They can. Yeah, 2 concurrent viewers now. Peak. Whatever.
Would you defend if I disagree?
No, that's fine. Just if I pique your interest, just throw out a comment or something like that.
Oh, so we're the last questions.
Yes.
Can they stream questions?
They can.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't have anybody that has replied to my chat. I asked them to introduce themselves and tell us where they're watching from. That doesn't mean your couch. I mean, just what city and state.
Yeah. Is it worldwide? Do they have people in China?
I don't know.
Could be.
So, Joel, are you watching this stream?
Not yet.
Oh, okay.
It just hopped on.
3 concurrent viewers. So there's people out there, 4 concurrent viewers. That must be you.
It's streaming right now. People are listening.
They're listening to me. This is the grand opening of the first ever live streamed lecture series. It's a grand thing. So, I don't know.
I can chat.
There we go. Whoa. Anthony, he's in Portage.
Oh, that's
Anthony Nader Mohammadi.
Nader Mohammed, yeah.
The-
He's
the-
looking back.
Amen. So he's watching. Mrs. Varna is watching from home. Okay. Joel's watching from Chesterton, Indiana, here in the room. All right. Kay Mitchell is here from across the hall. She's not across the hall. Well, at least we have some people in the room. This would be very interesting on a different level if there was no one's faces here.
I thought there was going to be enough needed room. Didn't you think that?
Yes.
Amy Porzinski in Baltimore, Maryland. Hi, Amy. Using Gayla Greenberg's login.
Dalia.
Galia.
Hi, Amy.
All right, let's just see if a few more people come in and then we'll get going. We got 7 concurrent viewers. So Anthony says, it's me. That's my email address. It's me. But I'll let him use it for today. I hear noise. Is someone else coming? Is there a live person coming to our live stream? No. They're sneaking by. Think Selena, but with a G. Got it. Galena Greenberg. Is Galena there with us too? Also. Joel, is there a way through this to like upload a document, or would that have to be somewhere else?
If you send it to me, I can put a link.
If I send it to you, I can put.
Live chat the link to it.
Okay. And I should. Okay. So how do I do that? Fairhaven. I don't know if I can get to it. It's in a folder that I didn't give myself access to. Can you just get it? College, SharePoint College, classes, education, teaching strategies, and it'll say TCP. It should be a PDF. There we go. I had a couple emails earlier today. Something came up, revival meetings. Can they watch it later? So they should be able to do that too.
What's the folder? Education?
Yes.
What's that under that?
Teaching strategies. It might be in the admin folder inside there. Did you find it? Are you in the folder? Under class files?
Class files, education, not departments.
Yeah, no, not departments. Oh, okay. So, well, we'll get to that later. Yeah.
I saw it earlier.
Okay. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Tammy from Fenwick, Michigan. Tammy from Fenwick, Michigan. Welcome. Welcome to our in-class and online students. And this is Teaching Strategies, our lecture series, and it is an education course. If you want to get that credit, there's information about that in the emails that we've sent out earlier. In this series, we will explore and discuss the various strategies used to teach effectively at all levels of instruction. And the focus is primarily academic, but it can definitely be applied to religious instruction. And the series will revolve around a model profile of a competent teacher. We're going to look at the teacher competence profile for a fair amount of today's lecture so we can understand where we're going. The text for the course, or we've said previously that the course is following the content of this book, Models, Strategies, and Methods for Effective Teaching by Lang and Evans. You're welcome to get it. We sent out a link earlier. You can get one used for $6 or $7 if it interests you that much. If you're just watching for the intellectual stimulation and that's it, you wouldn't need the book. So here's what we're going to do over the course of this school year. Tonight is our first lecture, and we'll discuss chapter 1 of this book, and this will lay out what we'll do for the rest of the series. In between now and the next lecture, which will be October 14th, I will post a link to a video of another man giving a series of lectures on maintaining teacher effectiveness. And these were recorded, I think, back in the 80s. The dress and hairstyles looks like it was in the 80s. But there's some very good information in that set of videos. So we'll be posting a link to that if you'd like to watch. In the interim, you can watch that. I'll have some questions with it that will just help you pay attention as you go along. And then our next session will be October 14th. And in that session, we will spend a little time at the beginning discussing the video that you watched in between, or for those of you that did watch it in between, we'll discuss that somewhat. And then we'll discuss communication skills, which is one of the competencies that we need as educators. Then between that lecture and the next one, we'll watch the second video of the Maintaining Teacher Effectiveness series. And then November 18th, we'll discuss that video and discuss the diverse students that we face and teach. And that will be the process that we follow through the course of this series. I will give a live streamed lecture, and then I'll give you a link to a recorded lecture by Don Moss and the Maintaining Teacher Effectiveness series. And then when we come back, we'll discuss the recorded lecture and discuss the next set of skills, kind of just going back and forth. My lecture, his lecture, we come back. So November 18th and then December 2nd. And then if you're wanting to take a test, or if you sign up for this as a college course, the first test would be, you could take it Christmas Day for that matter, sometime between December 2nd and our January 13th session. And then we'll continue all the way into May. There are lots of different things to discuss. I have more topics to discuss than I have sessions. But as we go along and to see how fast it takes to go through them, we might be able to get some of those in also. So, as I mentioned already, we have our text, and my lectures are going to revolve and follow the content of this book, Models, Strategies, and Methods for Effective Teaching. And then we have the Mastering Teacher Effectiveness videos. And then something else I'd like to encourage you to sign up for, because it has a lot to do. There's central to what we'll talk about is a session on classroom management. But classroom management fingers go into all different areas of being effective as a teacher. So a resource that I've discovered recently or been reading for the last year or so is called smartclassroommanagement.com. And so if you are if you're taking this course, I'd like you to go to that website, smartclassroommanagement.com, and sign up for their weekly email. You might go to the website and read a bunch of other things, but at least get his weekly emails, and that will give you some background for when we talk about classroom management in a few sessions down the road. All right, then Other things, if you're taking the class for credit, I would ask you to evaluate an alternative teaching strategy. That's a specific name. If you did a Google search on that, you'd see all kinds of lists of alternative teaching strategies. There's different situations that teachers face, and so people have written ideas on different ways to teach using alternative strategies. So if you are taking this as a college credit, I'd like you to investigate one of those and then present it to your peers. If you're Nicole James in South Florida who's joined us, I'd like you to present that to your peers there or somewhere else, and then record that and send it to me. And then you'd also research an appropriate topic and present your findings in a paper to me. Those are extras. Those are things that if you're taking the course for college credit, you would do. Okay, so that's kind of what we're doing and where we're going. And so then I'd like to get into our topic. So the first thing, and we have large class here. We might have more online than we have at present. But so I need some interaction if I can. First off, is teaching an art or a science? Have you ever heard that? Teaching is an art or teaching is a science. Is it an art or a science? If you want to pipe in with an answer on the chat, I'll look at that too. But if you think it's an art or a science or some type of a combination, what are your thoughts on that question?
A little of both.
A little of both. All right?
Yeah, I think it's a little both. You have to know what you're talking about, but you put your personal self into it as well.
Okay, you have to know some things, so that's like the science part of it. But you're saying you put yourself into it. It's like your stamp of individuality on it, and that would be the artistic quality of it. All right? Any other ideas in the room?
Teaching is very boring when it's just knowledge.
Oh, if it's just knowledge, if it's just the science, it's very boring. But we have a question there. Art. Okay, so this is Amy in Maryland. Art, but combination. It's a loaded question. Yes, it is a loaded question. So I'm going to leave the explanation of that to Don Moss. He talks about that, I believe, in his first video, and he's got a great illustration to visualize, if education, or if teaching was an art or if it was a science. But he tells the illustration much better. So, but yes, it's both art and science. You can't really separate them. Anytime that we are doing something, we're doing it to some extent at an artistic level. Even if we're very bad at the art, it's the personality, the personal stamp on it makes it an art. All right, so here's our next one, and this might be not as loaded. It's definitely a skill. Anthony says it's definitely a skill, for sure. But, and that brings us to this question. An effective teacher needs a specific repertoire or a specific tool bag of skills. Okay, I'll just repeat that. An effective teacher needs a specific tool bag of skills. I would assume we agree with that, but let's discuss it. What might be some of the tools in his tool bag? I have to remember these guys are a half a minute behind me, aren't they? Okay.
Well,
So.
I think you have to care about your students.
You have to care about the students.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, you've got to want to bring them along.
Okay, you have to care about them. You have to want to bring them along. Is that a skill that we can practice?
I think so.
Okay.
The more you interact with people, the more you get to know them, the more you care about them.
Sure. And you can even tell if you're not doing good at it and give yourself
Yeah.
actual goals. You could turn that into a very mechanical thing. If you had to, say, I'm going to make myself, interact with students in a particular way a certain number of times. And after a while, hopefully it would not be just like hitting a list, but for sure. All right?
You have to have leadership skills.
Leadership skills. What do you mean by leadership skills?
Well, you have to be able to assert yourself as the authority in the room,
Okay. You have to be able to assert yourself as the authority.
and you have to get your students to follow you.
Okay, get them to follow you.
And I think that a good leader is not, especially in younger grades, I've experienced this a lot. It's demerits.
Okay.
A good leader is able to get their students to follow them because they want to learn more and they want to please you. not
Okay.
just because they're afraid of getting in trouble.
All right, so I'm just going off of something I remember reading a little ways back, so I don't have like this list. But what are some things, good leadership skills, what are some things, what might we say are things that a leader does that is a sign that he or she is a good leader? What are some things that they do?
The experience.
They have experience.
Yeah.
Okay, so Morgan's out of it there. She's their rookie. But can a rookie look like they know what they're like? Can they be followed because can they exhibit things better than even somebody without experience, and people think enough about them to follow their leadership? So experience is true. That experience helps, but that's probably not one of those things that says, oh, they're a leader.
They have to be somewhat knowledgeable in what they're doing.
Knowledgeable, okay. They have to be able to talk about whatever, they have to know what they're talking about. That would, at a certain level, for sure, the older the students are, the more respect you would gain by having knowledge. Any other ideas?
I'm having a hard time formulating how to say it, but the idea of we've walked in their footsteps well before the time when they did.
All right.
And so in a Christian school environment that I'm familiar with, I've been them. And I have been able to see that, and so I can foresee some of the things that get them distracted.
Okay. So you're saying experience, but you're well beyond their present experiences. Okay. Anthony says plan ahead. And that's very good. If you have plans, somebody that's not a leader is just going wherever. They don't have any plans.
You can look like you have a plan.
You can, right, and you can look like you have a plan. Sure, I suppose you could fake it for a while, but even somebody who's not like super dynamic. What's the word? Like charismatic, but if they have a plan and they can execute that plan and the plan is well planned out, then people will follow that, even if they're not. Here we go. All right. Mrs. Reinhardt has joined us from home. So answer my questions. No. She didn't hear them. So what were we saying? Oh, a tool bag. They need to be a leader. They can show leadership by having knowledge, planning. What was the thing that you... Experience. Yes. I like the experience. Having experience and successfully maneuvered where the students are. Type of a thing. What other skills would a teacher need?
This is very practical, but you need certain public speaking skills.
Communication skills. Yes. And not just public speaking skills. You kind of do, we're talking here and I'm demonstrating whatever skills I have, but yes, you have to be able to talk in front of people. You have to, first of all, just be able to do it. Just be able to stand up in front of them and talk without freezing. But then the better, the more skills you have, the better that you're going to be. But even not just public speaking skills, communication skills. You have to be able to write a question in a way that the students can understand what you're asking for. You have to be able to write a note to parents or to a colleague or something. So communication skills, very much so, are skills that successful teacher, that a effective teacher has in his tool bag. Anything else that comes to mind?
I'd say integrity.
Integrity, for sure. Yeah. Is that an idea forming behind your eyes there?
You have to, in a classroom, you've got 10 to 30 kids looking at you, expecting you to keep their minds occupied. You have to have a knowledge of your subject, as well as kind of a multitask. You're a multitasker. You're watching for problems that arise that are taking attention away. You're constantly explaining things, and then not losing half the class when you cater to so-and-so who needs something explained to. So it's a little bit of what...
Management. Classroom management is very, very important skill to have. All right, how about this one? To what extent, and here we're getting into more of an academic type question, but to what extent does educational theory influence practice? So we're sitting here talking, we're theorizing about education. To what extent does this that we do here, or what you experienced in college, okay, so I can't remember who Patrick is. Tammy from Michigan says time management, for sure, very good. And Anthony says maintaining order and knowing the audience. So we've kind of talked about some of those already. So to what extent does what we talk about in a classroom affect what we actually do in a classroom? So how does what we say you should do when you're standing in front of a classroom affect what we do in the classroom, and vice versa? How does practicing something affect what we might teach? Let's take Morgan. How much is when you stand in front of the classroom different from what you wrote down when you were sitting in school?
Your students are individuals, and there's going to be different problems that you didn't learn about in the classroom that you're going to have to deal with right then and there.
Okay, so when you're practicing it, when you're actually doing it, you have real live people there that don't react the same way that your teacher said students are going to react. They told you their experiences maybe, but your experience is different, okay?
It's one thing to know a topic, it's another to teach it.
Sure, yes, for sure.
Words that make sense for others.
Okay. And that would be something that a lot of, like where you are, and myself, even Mr. Schreiber, and in a lot of education, secondary education majors in a lot of places get a lot of content in their schooling, but they don't get any of like ideas, practice, and even instruction on how to deliver content. We just, the level of what you're expected to know is kind of a lot higher than 5th and 6th grade, so you get a lot more classes on it and not much experience or even training, teaching on how to teach it. So, all right. Why are planning a lesson, so what is planning a lesson? We'll go with our elementary teacher again. You plan lesson. You have lesson plans.
Yes.
How do you plan a lesson?
Um,
I haven't planned a lesson in a long time.
I follow a curriculum, so it's
You follow a curriculum. So how did the person who writes the curriculum plan your lesson for you?
so they have the next lesson, they have reviewing the lessons previous to that, they have introducing a new concept, and then they have practice with the new concept.
Okay, so generally your lesson plan is review, present new, and then apply, practice. All right, so, and is it important, okay, why is it critical to have a lesson plan to be effective? Can we,
What's like an outline, it gives you an overall scope of, so I want to teach this subject matter to this age group, and so they should know probably this.
right,
And so I want to make sure I get it all in, I want to make sure that they get it, and there's some kind of measure to see that.
so what if we didn't have a plan? I say I haven't done a lesson plan, but I've spent hours getting ready for this lecture. I prepared something, hopefully we'll cover it. I looked at that in comparison to what I think we'll cover in the next lecture and all that, and the next and the next. If I don't have a plan for my lectures or my lessons, we might just talk about fun things for a long time or interesting things for a long time and never really cover what we said we were going to cover.
Very easy to get bogged down.
Yeah,
Even a good question from a student can end.
right. Even a good question can get you off your plan. And if you have a plan, you can use that good question, or you can redirect it or something else so that you stick within the plan. If you don't have the plan, then you won't accomplish the delivery of the content that your students or your students' parents expect from you. So, a lesson plan is critical to effective teaching. But what about planning a professional approach? Planning the other aspects besides the lesson. Planning how we're going to teach classroom management. Mr. Schreiber probably doesn't, you haven't been in 7th grade math for a long time, right? But okay, Morgan has 1st and 2nd graders, Joel has high school, 7th and 8th graders. If you don't plan more than your lesson plan, if you don't plan like the whole school day plan for you, if you don't plan, we need to learn this, and it has nothing to do with math, science, it just has to do with being in a classroom with other people. You have to have a plan for how students are going to enter the room and leave the room, and how they're going to turn papers in, and what they're going to do at this time. Those types of plans are critical to effective teaching also, because if you don't have the mechanics of the classroom going smoothly, you'll lose lots of time. And then you won't have the time to teach what you think. Mrs. Varner says, for lesson plan, you may forget important things you should say when lecturing if you don't have the plan. That is true. You can go from the top of your head, and the top of your head can be missing that important thing that you won't find out that you didn't teach it until the test. And then they'll say, you didn't teach that. And you say, well, I know I always teach that. So a lesson plan helps. Lisa Reinhardt says, planning anything helps it run smoothly, accomplish something. So I think the reason we have this question, just to get us thinking, is that almost all teachers, they're all on the lesson plan thing. I got to get my lesson plans. But if all you do is your lesson plans and you don't have plans for your whole profession, whatever communication skills, classroom management skills, just whatever else, everything else that you face besides the lesson, then you're not going to be as effective a teacher. So, then this last question. Why are learning from experience and reflection critical to professional development? All right, so professional development means we're teachers and we want to get better. So almost all schools, we have a plan for professional development. So this question asks, why are learning from experience and reflection, so our experiences and then reflecting on our experiences, critical to professional development?
It's easy to teach the same thing year in and year out, and you've got to evaluate, okay, what's the big picture here? What are my students actually getting? How much are they understanding? Should I be approaching this at a different angle? So it's kind of evaluating yourself.
Right, and so, but, so why is evaluating yourself, reflecting, critical to your professional development? I mean, you have to, you're right, but
You won't get better.
you won't get better. I didn't think of it, I thought about this a while, but I didn't think about it until just now. If you don't learn from your experience and you don't reflect on yourself, you're like the man that looks in the mirror and then goes his way, and you just taught the class and then you go your way and don't even think about what you did. I guess it's not, you haven't even looked in the mirror, I suppose. But in a certain sense, we should work at reflecting on what happened in that class period, okay? And maybe don't always reflect on the days that just blew up, what happened? You almost are forced to reflect on that, and then you don't want to. But even if a class went really well, to think back and say, okay, so at that class, I felt like I was able to present things clearly. It seemed like the students were responding. What did I say? What activity or what teaching strategy, how did I present the information? Was it deductive or inductive? Was there a particular activity, a hands-on activity, or a listening activity? Whatever, all these different things are involved in a lesson. Think back on that and learn from that. And we'll always learn because next year we're going to have a different set of students. So the different set of students is going to have different types of, they're going to understand things in different ways. Individuals will, and there'll be a higher balance of these types of learners or that types of learners. So it's important for us to reflect on what we do and on the experiences we've had in order to become better at what we're doing. All right, I want to then, for the rest of the time, introduce the teaching competence profile. Did you find that yet, Joel?
I sent it.
Okay, so if you are, can you send it to these guys also? If you're online, you should be able to see somewhere, Joel has sent a, did you send it through the
Chat.
through the chat? Okay.
Oh, sorry, just sent the YouTube link wrong.
Joel is sending
It's up. It's one of the earlier chat.
an earlier chat, a PDF, which I'm not going through this in exactly the same order as this this piece of paper, but here, I'll just give it to you. You can just kind of glance at that. And he's sending it to you. So we're going to look at the teaching competence profile, and these things that we'll talk about are what people who've studied education for years and years and years have kind of boiled it all down to these categories and different types and skills within them. And so we will kind of just introduce them right now, and then through the development of this lecture series, we'll talk about them in more specifics. Actually, the next one, I think I said, is communication skills on October 14th. We'll look at communication skills. So, in the teaching competence profile, there's different categories of them. And again, I don't know if the order I'm going through is the same as the order on the PDF that's there available to you in the chat. But one category of competencies are professional qualities. As a professional, and sometimes we in Christian education, if you're in Christian education, we kind of don't like the term professional because professional educators are impersonal and blah, blah, blah. We're Christian educators. But at the same time, we should look at ourselves, and many professional educators. So what happens then? Let me back up. Some Christian educators just rely totally on their art. Going back to that art and science thing, they depend on the Holy Spirit, we might say, and I'm saying that with my tongue in cheek, and that's not something to joke about, but they just go with their art and their feelings, and they don't approach what they're doing as a profession, as something that can be studied and can be improved on. Of course, professional educators, we hear the stories of the ones that are just in it for the money, but most teachers around the world are not in it for the money. Some are, that's undeniable, but they're not in it for the money. And we are not in it for the money necessarily, but we should look at it, look at our profession, our job as a profession, which is something that we can improve upon. And so these professional qualities, there's some general skills in professional qualities like showing an interest and commitment to teaching. That would apply to those, we just talked about those that are just in it for the money. But general skill demonstrates initiative.
It's appearing that it's not taking my link in the chat.
Oh, it's not taking the link.
Checking it.
Okay.
So they just put their email address on.
Okay, so if you'd like, if you will put your email address, if you're comfortable putting your email address in the chat, Joel's watching the chat and he will send it to you. Or you can just, earlier in the chat, he put his email address. If you want to just email him, he can reply with this document that we're kind of talking through.
I'll post it on the page.
Right, and then,
Class.
can you do that right now?
I can do that.
Okay, so on the if you refresh the page or whatever, it'll be there. The teaching competence profile will be on the lecture series page also. Anyway, demonstrates initiative. Their personal manner is dependable and mature. I don't know that these things need explaining, but sometimes you get student teachers that are not mature, but we try to tell them, now you're teaching, be mature. Deals effectively with personal and interpersonal stress and conflict. As a professional, and we're going to use that term for this hour, we have to be able to deal with things that come up in our lives. You run into a personal problem, something with your finances or something with your house, the water line breaks and you've got to deal with that. You've got to be at a professional level. You've got to be able to deal with that stress and really not let it affect what you're doing as you're teaching. We come to a certain point where these things, and even interpersonal stress, relationships with other people that are not part of your classroom for sure, you've got to be able to deal with that and not let them deal with that effectively, so that it doesn't influence or affect your teaching. Demonstrates confidence and enthusiasm. Demonstrates creativity and flexibility. I think about anybody that's taught for a very long time at all has that flexibility thing, they know what I'm talking about. Things will change, administration will make changes, and I'm guilty of that. Whatever, there's just so many different things that can change. So, the flexibility is the mother of creativity. Whatever. Collaborates and cooperates with school staff. Okay, if you're working in a school environment, you're going to accomplish more if you can work with those around you. If you're just like, I do my thing and just leave me alone and let me get my stuff done, that's not generally, it's a good skill to be able to work with others, especially in a school environment. Relates effectively to students' caregivers. Now, the primary caregiver is their parents, but in every school situation, the world is such that sometimes it's not their parent, that's their person, that's their guardian or whatever. But we have to be able to, just a general skill, be able to talk with them. They're the ones that care even more about them than you do as a teacher. And so you have to be able to relate effectively to them. Get involved in student-related activities. I think teachers oftentimes are tempted by all the weight of the classroom, grading papers and stuff, not to be involved in students' lives outside of their classroom, and making time, being able to watch a game or go to this or that, something that's an activity outside of your classroom, helps you see your students in another situation. And really seeing what they're good at or what they like a lot or something like that really gives you insight into that you can actually use in the classroom. And then practices a professional code of ethics. You mentioned integrity way back. Then professional qualities, a professional development process. Works at that, implements a plan for growth based on reflection on experiences, evaluates your planning, evaluates instruction and classroom management, and participates in a planned professional development. So then, so those are professional qualities. Then, qualities related to interaction with learners. So if there should be a larger category there, interaction with learners. Diversity issues. Now, of course, this text, if you get this text and look under diversity issues, you're going to see a lot more diverse issues than I would be necessarily concerned with. But we do have a diverse students. I mean, unless you're at an all-boys school, you at least have boys and girls in your classroom. And they're made differently. And they think differently. And they learn differently. And they act differently. And if we try to, one of the criticisms of classroom schooling, and it's true, is that it hinders boys' development because it tells the boys they should all fit this mold. And God created men to be leaders, and so if they're all just fitting the mold, I know a leader has to be able to obey authority and all that, and every boy can learn in a classroom, but we have to understand there's a difference there. And that's just one. There's many, many differences within our students. Some students learn differently. I don't know if I have, So some students learn differently. Some students come from different backgrounds. And some students, their parents are on staff, and other students, their parents aren't on staff. Those are different kids. They have different backgrounds. And in our minds, we have to notice those differences, and sometimes maybe say, well, there's no differences there. But in our mind, because we work with their parent, so this is a reverse thing. We may be tempted to favor them or not favor them. Their dad would never want them doing that. So, just down their throat with something that another kid does it, and you would treat them differently. So anyway, diversity issues. Promotes the worth of all students, responds to the needs of all, is attentive to learning styles. And this is something that I think learning styles is something that's more, it needs to be noticed more in younger ages. As we get older, we should learn how we learn and be able to not accommodate, overcome if our learning style is something different. I think in high school, middle school, high school, we should be helping students, somebody that always has to, they learn best if they hear it, or they learn best if they do it. In one sense, we should recognize that that's a reality within human nature. People learn different ways. In another sense, we should be recognizing that and preparing students for, I would say, for college or upper high school when almost all information is delivered a certain way. To me, high school teachers and college teachers shouldn't be concerning themselves with learning modalities and these types of things that are realities, but they're not. The student should have been taught how to deal with that in their upbringing. But we should, if we're a professional teacher, if we're teaching, we should be aware of those things and know how to help somebody with them based on where they are. Is adept at intercultural communication. You might not have very many different cultures in your classroom. And I don't know how, Mr. Schreiber, he could speak in a few different languages if he had different people in his classroom. I don't know if that's what I'm. Okay, well, it's not dead, but it's back on. It says green. It's blinking. If it's blinking, does that mean it's dying?
Need some batteries.
All right, time out. Thanks for letting us know that. Yeah, it's blinking like crazy. How do you get this off?
There's a button.
All right, it's back, they say. But that was probably while I pushed it. I have sound.
Yes.
All right. Where were we? Managing disruptions. Attitudes and values. So there are things that we can do as teachers that make learning, make interaction and the processes that go on in students' minds, etc. It makes that they don't feel like participating, and it's our fault. Now, there's other reasons that it's their fault, but there are things that we can do as teachers that make participating in the learning process enjoyable, or, yeah, I like to use that word enjoyable. It doesn't have to be fun. It can just be enjoyable. But showing, and these other things really are part of that, showing an interest in them, motivating them to participate, encouraging and supporting them. So that's what we'll look at these in various lectures. That's under interaction with learners. Then the next category on my list is classroom management and discipline. Classroom management and discipline. And again, so that's kind of what we were just talking about, creating a positive classroom climate conducive to learning. But things that are involved in that is communicates and monitors expectations. What do you expect? Communicate that clearly so that students know, and then monitor it. If you just say, this is what I expect, and then there's nothing that you don't monitor it, human nature is going to test those boundaries and you won't have what you expect. Communicates and monitors expectations. Establishes and uses effective classroom routines and procedures. So you establish classroom routine or procedure and you use them. I think a key word there is effective. A lot of times we need to just think through. We could, in our mind, we can say, this is what I want to have happen. But if we don't walk through what the students are going to do, sometimes it's not really effective. It's actually very confusing, or excuse me, it introduces more disruptions into the classroom rather than making things smooth. So discovering, figure out what is effective, and then establishing it and using it. Handled minor disruptions in a positive way. Some things don't have to be just, pounced on. There's a lot of different ways that I won't give examples of that. I encourage you, if you are listening now and you didn't catch it earlier, we'll put the link there, but I encourage you to sign up for smartclassroommanagement.com's weekly newsletter. He talks about a lot of these things in a way that's very, very helpful. Anticipates problems and plans for successful preventive management. So one of the things, if you have a set of classroom rules, this is how it's going to work in my classroom. Ideally, you have thought of every single thing that might happen, and you've got a rule for it. Now, that doesn't mean you have 3,500 rules. Your 12 or 13 rules is a shield from everything that might happen. So this anticipating problems and plans for successful preventive management. Uses management skills effectively. Exhibits understanding of student behavior. It does help to understand what's going on in a student. We don't have to be, psychologists or psychiatrists, but, why do students act this way? And of course, they act that way for different reasons at different ages. But understanding somewhat of what's going on there, and then practices fairness and consistency, or is consistent. I want to go back to, I mentioned smartclassroommanagement.com. I mentioned it earlier, and I just mentioned it. I do want to say, of course, he's a secular educator. But what I've noticed reading him is that almost everything that he deals with is happening inside this category of, if you're at a Christian school with a demerit system, or your school has this type, our discipline system, what he's talking about is how you manage your classroom inside of that. It's how you teach routines and whatever, everything else that happens so that it's how you respond to infractions. It's all these types of things that the way we respond or the way we react many times causes students to be even more uptight or more restless. And so there's things we can implement that will help calm a classroom, and much of it is strict boundaries, but those boundaries are strict, and then what we do inside that helps promote a well-functioning classroom with not a lot of discipline issues. All right, then another category of competencies is planning and organization of lessons and units. So planning out your curriculum, planning out your instruction. So under planning, teacher integrates skills common to all subjects and adapts the curriculum to individual needs, plans varied activities, outlines long-range plans to guide student development, plans interdisciplinary thematic units, and includes classroom management in plans. This is interesting. It's interesting to me. It's been a while since I had looked at this book, and then getting ready for this class, I was reading it again. But it's interesting to me. In the meantime, I've been working on some classroom management difficulties of my own in my band class. That's like, I've provided excuses for them for many years, and so I've been reaping recently. And so I'm trying to figure out how I can do that, how I can get the behavior to be what I think it ought to be here. And I'm seeing that you have to, if I'm going to be successfully manage the band classroom, I have to plan it. I have to plan, I'm going to talk about this, and then I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to demonstrate this is what I expect. I have to model it. And I can't just say, well, they're not acting the way I want. So planning even involves planning classroom management. So that, and I understand if Morgan said to me, I'm just going to start teaching addition and subtraction and whatever with my first graders, I would say, you're crazy, Morgan. You got to teach these first graders how you want them to act. If you spend the time in the beginning of the year, you'll be able to go so much farther once they're disciplined. But we get older and we think classroom management isn't as important. And some of it it shouldn't take me as many hours of routine schedule, modeling and teaching in high school as it does for the grade schoolers. But it has to be planned. Even in college, it doesn't have to be even extra long, but we have to articulate what our expectations are and say, this is Fairhaven Baptist College, but I'm Mr. Schreiber, and in my class, this is how papers are turned in, this is how you don't use your computer during class or whatever. These are my expectations. This is how my classroom is managed. And you have to put that in there. Otherwise, you'll forget, that you're in your first class of the year and you forget to mention it because you've said it 3 times already. You think everybody here knows what I expect, or just subconsciously. And then the next week, somebody's got their computer out in class or something. So it has to be planned. Anyway, planning. Lots of different parts of planning. And then instruction. This is where we are, right? We're like, of course. Demonstrates competence in basic instructional skills. Teaches for holistic development. We're teaching. I would say, especially as Christians, we understand that that person sitting in front of us is not just a brain that needs information put into it. They have a brain that sits in a body, and they interact with other people, and they have to stand before God someday. So there's spiritual, social, physical, intellectual, and that's all involved in what we're teaching all day long. Varies teaching approaches and activities. And I hope I don't think I'm giving an excuse. It's just, but I think that the older you get in your instruction, the less, is that the right word? The less variety you need to have in instruction. Okay, ideally, adult learners' minds have been disciplined enough to be able to pay attention to an hour and a half lecture looking at their screen. You guys there on the couch ran off to the kitchen to get your stuff. Pay attention. But anyway, really, as we get older, we can pay attention. We can hopefully be distracted by something and then grab our attention and bring it back. Mrs. Mitchell is probably shopping somewhere, not catching this. I'm trying to get some replies. Give them 30 seconds, they'll start replying. Anyway, but as we get older, we don't really need to have a lot of variety in our instruction. Most college instruction is just plain lectures. We don't have to, but the time that you decide to do something else, the students will be, they'll enjoy it. It'll be refreshing and all that. It might even be effective. But the most economical way to get information across is through lectures. And normally in college we have lots of information. Anyway, an effective teacher ensures the participation of all, trying to get everyone involved in the class that's there, engages students in instructional dialogue, provides a motivating set and closure. The motivating set and closure is a technical term, and there'll be one of Don Maas's videos that we'll have the link for. He goes through that, but it's very helpful. Orders and sequences content to meet learners' needs. So we think about what we're teaching, we think about who our class is, and we say, okay, we need to do it in this order. In one sense, if you've been teaching for a while, I hope this is like, duh, type of course, that's what you do. I just had to take a course that I typically taught to sophomores and rework it to teach freshmen in college. So I had to reorder stuff and all of that. So, but it takes skill to do that and provides for transfer of learning. Then planning curriculum, adapts curriculum to students' needs, knows the subject matter, exhibits knowledge of local influences on subject matter. So you might have, like we have a textbook. This is a secular textbook. As we go through it, I'm going to put my local influence on it, which is a Bible college influence on this information, and that could happen in a lot of different situations. Then, teaching competence. So, when we're actually teaching, what are we doing? So, one category there is questioning, discussion, seat work, and homework. So, when we're teaching, we use questions. Do we use them effectively? Many times teachers use questions as rhetorical devices and not as instructional devices. They ask a question hoping that it just wakes the attention of the listener up and move right along. They answer it immediately, or, so it's not really something that works like it could. So there's definitely skills that can be learned, practiced, implemented in questioning. So do you have those skills? Do you work on them, practice them? Conducts an effective class discussion, sets meaningful seat work and homework at certain levels. We have seat work and homework, but it should be meaningful. What's going on during those times? So, then teaching of skills. Can you provide effective teaching of skills and demonstrations? Concept teaching provides effective teaching of concepts and explanations. Then there's direct instruction, so you can instruct directly. That would be using a deductive or expository method. Do you effectively use the individual study strategy? In a certain sense, it makes me think, I believe, like when you send a student to do a project in college, they're hopefully learning something. Do we use that method effectively? Indirect instruction and experiential learning provides effective use of indirect, inductive, or inquiry methods. So an inductive study is where you kind of present the situation and then, this is probably oversimplifying, but then you ask questions about what can we learn from this situation? What can we see here? Rather than saying, here's this, and then let's know these things. And then experiential learning, I don't think Christians subscribe very much to using experience as teaching, but we all have experiences, and those things can be very effective in teaching. We get into preaching and we're in a certain sense, we're very much wanting our students to have a change in their experience or do something. And if they follow through and do something, their experience will confirm what we've taught them. So that's the way I'm interpreting that idea of experiential learning, to encourage active learning. And the idea there, in a certain sense, is that we want our students not to stop learning once they stop going to school. So if there's certain types of learning that promotes, deductive teaching doesn't promote, learning on your own. It's kind of like, well, I can only learn something if the teacher tells me. But inductive, looking at something and saying, what can we learn from that? Learning from experiences, what can we learn from this experience? Those are things that if they learn those skills, they proceed on and they can continue to learn. Not that they couldn't, go find a book and learn deductively from it once they're out of school. But there's so many different ways to learn. And that's the idea with the experiential learning. Collaborative and cooperative learning, again, group skills, develops group skills in the classroom. Group skills as conservatives or as Christians. There's plenty of jokes that show how group projects get done. One person does it all and everybody else watches and whatever. But at the same time, as Christians, we should learn how to work with one another. God created us in a body, and we all have to do our part. So, somehow that learning collaborative and cooperative skills we can develop some way or another. Or maybe we just say that's not part of what we're doing in the classroom. Thinking skills and problem-based learning, we use a specific instruction in the nature and use of thinking skills and processes. We might have a lecture on this later, but it's one of these extra things that if things go faster, we'll get it in. In fact, all of these where'd it go? Instruction things, direct instruction, indirect instruction, cooperative learning, and thinking skills. Those are kind of the last that we'll get to. But anyway, ensure students are using higher order thinking skills. I use that term. Another commonly interchanged term is critical thinking skills. I don't like the idea of the term critical thinking skills because it seems like people immediately think they should be critical. And critical thinking skills doesn't really have anything to do with being, criticism or being critical. It's just different ways that we process information and just that cognitive skills. We remember something, that's about the lowest. We understand it, we can apply it, we can break down something, analyze something, we can synthesize something, we can evaluate something. Those are the higher order thinking skills. And so giving students problems or giving them situations that they have to do more than just remember is what we're talking about when we're talking about using and developing student skills in higher order thinking skills. Probably doesn't happen much in first and second grade. You really do have to have something to think about before you can do that. And so actually, even in college, there are certain classes that are basically just information. It's the first time they've ever heard of this stuff, and so they can't really think about it until they get the information. Maybe since they're in college, they can get the information for 2 or 3 weeks, and then we can spend an hour talking about it because their mind is hopefully developed beyond. But there's a lot of classes that are still, even at the college undergraduate level, totally knowledge and comprehension and not much actual application. But once you get out of college and you've got a master's level course and you've had the opportunities to try to apply the things that you learned in college, then you can start using those higher order thinking skills. Ensures that students think creatively. And I think that we don't need to be afraid of that term, creativity. They don't have to be like weird creative, just as long, to me, what we don't want them to think is rotely. We don't want students to just think rotely. Now, if they're doing their mathematics table, multiplication table, we do that rotely. But we don't need to be creative there. But I think we understand that. And then skilled and effective approach to problem-based learning. A couple more areas, assessment and evaluation. We'll look at assessments and evaluation. A good teacher can identify students' academic, personal, and social strengths, and then assess change in their students' development. Evaluate students' progress, keep thorough, well-organized records, and provides diagnosis and remediation. And then the last one for today is personal qualities, communication skills. This is something that we mentioned way back an hour or so ago. And so this would be models appropriate voice and spoken and written language. So your voice needs to be such that it's appropriate, not too soft, not too monotone, not too crazy, whatever. But then also your spoken language should be a model. We are educators, so in a certain sense, we shouldn't use slang. I'm stuttering here, but and I'm saying too much. But we should try very hard not to do. We should watch for those things and watch ourselves and try to eliminate them from even our voice or even our speech. We should also be careful not to use slang or use current terms or even speech styles. For me, teenagers are right now, classic at not finishing sentences. They just begin and then somehow everyone knows what they're thinking. We shouldn't speak that way. And then even writing, our written language should be grammatically correct. We're educators, we should be a model of what's correct. There's so much variety available to us in the words we can use and still be correct, it won't constrict us too much to work at that. And then makes effective use of interpersonal skills. Well, that's happening while we're communicating one to another, so we want to do that in a way that's effective as we're working with one another. So that was a little perhaps boring or just like over and over, lots of information. What we'll do going forward, our next lecture, we're going to talk about communication skills. We'll also discuss what Don Moss talks about in his first video. If you're interested in knowing the outline of the discussion on communication skills, it would be in chapter 2 of this book. Again, you don't have to go get the book, but if you don't mind spending $8 on Amazon for a used copy, you can get them there. And chapter 2 will be the outline for our discussion at the next session. So, just to review for anybody that's joined later, what's going to happen? We are using this book as the model, or as the following the content in here for what we're going to talk about. We also are going to be posting links to the lecture series page to lectures by Don Moss on maintaining teacher effectiveness. Those will go up in between these lectures, and if you watch them and answer the questions that are with them, you can more easily participate in the discussion of those at the beginning of the next session, which will be October 14th, and that will be the pattern. a live stream lecture, and then a recorded lecture by Don Moss, and then another live stream lecture. The next one is October 14th, and the one after that will be November 18th. All of these are available after the fact, too. So if you, for some reason, can't log in right away, or you have, I know some people have revival meetings, or something came up, since you subscribe to the lecture series, you have the link for the page where everything will be available to you later on. So even if you're here and you can't come to it and you want to know what we did, you just go to the page and catch up the next time. So thank you for coming, and that's all for today's lecture.